to show the agenda for today. The plan, can you see something? Adam, is there something there? Yeah, okay. First, we'll just take a look at the agenda to see if there's any additions. We will be getting a great presentation today. I'm so excited from Cynthia Braddock and from Lori Mitchell, kind of on really what they do. So that should be very exciting. Just give you a quick update on the contract now for the work. I did include it in the email, but I think Phyllis and then at some point Jen will also be joining the meeting just to be able to hear what we're talking about today. We have had a couple of great links to some additional presentation requests that look like they'll be coming up in the next month or two, so that should be exciting. And additionally, one that has not been scheduled at a specific date. And again, we've seen, what's there in terms of next steps. This has not changed from the last month, but I thought it would be important just to put the kind of the timeline out there. So kind of seeing what the agenda is for today, are there any additions that people would like to see? Not hearing anything or seeing. Oh, did I see a hand? No. So with that, I will stop sharing it and now turn it over to Cynthia and Lori.
All right, I'm going to share the slides from my desktop and assist Lori when she presents. So I'm going to make sure technology works here. Where's the sharing? Can you all see the presentation?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. I don't know that I've ever heard the assessment process called exciting before, so thank you, Elizabeth. It made my day. We've been called a lot of things, but not exciting. So I'm going to do just a very high level overview. It'd be easy to spend a long time talking about the assessment process because of all the bits and pieces that go into establishing value and creating a tax roll. So I'm going to keep it high level, happy to answer questions, and then we'll roll and maybe hold questions, and we can roll into Lori's. And then if there's anything questions for us, we can talk about it after the presentation if that works. And I'm also fortunate to have Lori DeCrow. The Division of Property Taxation that Lori works for interprets the laws and writes all of the guidelines for county assessors in the state of Colorado. So we turn to them, to their staff, and to their documentation for a lot of what we do, to explain how we do it. They provide training as well. So Lori can keep me honest. So this is basically what assessors do. We're responsible for managing the management and the operation of an assessor's office and the assessment process. And our ultimate client is the treasurer. Along the way, the Constitution says that all property owners have the right to due process. All citizens have the right to due process. So when we establish values, there is a process by which property owners can enter into conversations with us about the property values that we've assigned. Our major duties are discovering, listing, classifying, and valuing properties. And that takes us, a large staff all day to handle these things all year. And we are responsible for valuing all real and personal property and all properties that are granted exemption through the Division of Property Taxation located in the county by the assessment date. And there's a lot that goes into that. I added to the list, discover, list, classify, values, support. And the supporting of our values is what we do through the appeal process with citizens, with property owners. So this is a repeated cycle. We repeat our cycle every 2 years in Colorado. We collect data for a 2-year period of time. We use that data to establish values through a mass appraisal process. We then, in the subsequent year, we notify property owners of their values. That opens up the due process calendar. It starts in May 1st, and then rolls through the summer we certify, and it goes to the county board, and I'll touch all of that. There's all sorts of different levels of appeal. And by the end of December or middle of December, we certify values out to the taxing authorities, school districts, cities, counties, all of them. They use the values we certify to them to develop their budgets and establish their mill levies, which are given back to us, and we provide them in the tax roll to the treasurers. And on the screen are 3 different, I've just duplicated because it's a 2-year cycle that just keeps rolling. When we're done with one, we're rolling right into the next. This is just a quick overview calendar. We have 2 calendars. This is the one for real property. For 24 months, 18 to 24 months in Boulder County, we collect data for 24 months. So we're collecting all kinds of information, mostly sales information. And we use that information to establish values for all properties in the county. Some important dates: the end of the data collection period. It starts in July 1st of an even year, and it ends June 30th of the next even year. So we just ended the data collection period for the next reappraisal, which is next year, the odd numbered year. So June 30th is considered our appraisal date, and that's the date at which we value all properties as if they stand on that date. And there's a lot that goes into doing that. And then every year on January 1st, we look at the use, the classification, and the condition of properties. So those are both really important dates. So we establish value on the 30th of June and the even numbered year. And then we look at how those values apply to the use, condition, and classification of properties on the 1st of the year. And then we notice that out to the property owners on May 1st of the odd numbered year. So odd numbered years are reappraisal years. Even numbered years are intervening years. In the intervening year, values do change, but they happen only when there's unusual conditions. So a demolition, new construction, change of use, those sort of things. In the even numbered year, we can change value, but it's pretty limited pool. The second calendar shows just the appeal process. So on May 1, we send out notices of valuation to all citizens. We start the appeal process. It ends June 8th. We spend all summer reviewing those appeals. And then we send a notice of determination out on August 15th, at which point, if a property owner is still concerned about the value, they can go on to the County Board of Equalization, which we show up as expert witnesses from the assessor's office, and the hearings are actually managed by the county board. They notice out the results of those hearings on November 1st, and then we certify values on the 10th, but there's all kinds of remedies beyond the current year. So property owner can go on to the state level, district court, whatever. So there's always remedy for property owners. And then along overlaying this calendar is the business personal property calendar. So we're also responsible for valuing business personal property, which is business equipment. So if you owned a Domino's, your ovens, your tables, your cash register, those sort of things are taxable. Your inventory is not. So your bags of flour, your pepperoni, all of that is not taxable. So we're looking at equipment. There's also a limit. A couple of years ago, the legislature put a limit on sort of a maximum amount. So if you have a business personal property that is less than $52,000 a year in value, you're tax exempt. So that's cut our file down by about half of the properties that we value, business personal properties. So getting into the things that we're required to do. So this gets to the data piece that you all are most interested in. So we are an office of record, and we rely on the official record. So all of our ownership and our legal description information comes from recorded deeds. And this is our friends and partners in this are the county clerks, and we rely on them for information. The deeds that we get, the ones that that we research and look into that are arm's length sales, those are used to establish value. We get a lot of other documents that change ownership, death certificates, quitclaim deeds, all sorts of things like that would change ownership on a property or might change the legal description on a property. Those are not necessarily used to establish value, but that's how we track the ownership of property. So we lean heavily on our clerks to let us know what's going on in the county. We also have secondary sources. These are not sources that change ownership or legal description at all, but they tell us about the property and its condition, how it's being used, its classification. So we have access to all the jurisdictions permitting agencies. So in our Boulder County has 9 communities in it that we get. So the county and all the communities, and we have access to their building permits. So we can get a sense of new construction, remodels, all of that are going on with properties. We use the multiple listing service to know what's coming, what something was listed at, what it sold for, were there conditions on the property. We also use other characteristic aggregators, so like CoStar, Apartment Insights, mostly used for the more unique non-residential properties, commercial, industrial, airport hangars, those sorts of things. We send out sales confirmation letters. So when we find that something is sold, we reach out to the property owners, the buyers and sellers, to see if they can help us understand the sale. We do site visits. The assessors are not allowed to enter property without approval of the property owner. So it's from, unless we get invited in, we do it from the public road, the driveway. We don't look in windows. We don't look over fences. So pretty limited, especially if you go up in the mountain areas or out in the rural areas where someone may have a gate. We only know what we can access on these properties. So, but we do site visits quite regularly. We rely on digital means, aerial imagery, maps, GIS, anything that's out there that can help us understand properties. And then for business personal property, there's a process where property owners are requested to file a declaration, a real personal property declaration with us every year, and it contains a list of assets, and we use that to establish value for the personal property accounts. So that's discovery. So our biggest source of data is the clerk and recorder. Describing and identifying. So we're looking at physical location of the property. We use GIS, site visits, maps, surveys to understand the physical location of a property. We keep all this information in a huge database where it not only has ownership records and legal description records, but it has the characteristics of the property. You know, what's the home like, all the description of the home or the building, the commercial building, or the personal property assets are all in our database. And we're continually looking at that and learning more about properties. And because that makes a difference in how we establish value, is how much we understand about a property. And then through the appeal process, we're hoping we're in conversation with property owners and they help us understand more, because we only know what we know. And they live in those properties or work in those properties and have really important information to share with us. So our software is called a computer aided mass appraisal software, which the acronym is CAMA. And it's a front end that displays all the characteristics we carry in these large databases behind the screen. Classification, we're looking at, is it real versus personal property, and what are all the characteristics associated with that? Is it taxable versus exempt? So things are deemed to be taxable unless they're either exempt by law. So schools, let's say your school district properties are exempt by law, state-owned properties are exempt by law, federal properties are exempt by law. And then there's exemptions that the Department of Property Taxation allows, and they are schools, daycares, nonprofits, those sort of things. And there's an application process. They apply to the state, and then we are informed of the exempt status of those properties. And then again, we look at the classification of properties on January 1 of every year to make sure that we have things classified properly. Things change. An example we had recently was a home that had been converted into a dentist's office and then converted back to a home, and we didn't catch the conversion. So on January 1, we were, talking to the property owner about, is it a home or is it a dentist office? I mean, what's going on here? Because there's different assessment rates, there's just different valuation, there's different taxes associated with those different uses. Estimate of value. So we use mass appraisal. We're required to, and this is the Code of Ethics definition of mass appraisal, which we're looking at a universe of properties as at a given date using standard methodology, employing common data and allowing for statistical testing. So we have to deliver values on all properties on May 1 every year. And to do that, we have to use some form of methodology to get our arms around all the properties in the county. So Boulder County has 130,000 parcels. Denver has over 200,000. And so to be able to do this, mass appraisal is important. And so we collect all the data about properties, all the characteristics we can discover, and they go beyond just bedroom, bathroom count. We're looking at influences, like is it on a busy street? Is it backing to open space? In Boulder County, we discovered that there's an airport influence. You know, if airplanes are flying over your home all the time, or if you can visually see an oil and gas derrick, there's a negative impact on value. So we're collecting this information all the time. Those are fed into our models, and we build valuation models, and those models tell us what each of those characteristics contribute to the value of the property. So that's using our solds, all the sales. And then once we know what all these characteristics contribute to value, we then apply that out to our unsold population. So the homes that didn't change hands, we then know, homes in this area, the bedrooms contribute this much to the value. The view or the traffic count and all the things contribute this way to the value of that property. And then just reminder that every year we're audited. The State Board of Equalization hires an auditor through an RFP process, and we are audited on statistical and procedural compliance. And so at least at the statistical level, we are reviewed yearly. And this is the support part. When we notice property owners of their values, they have the right to contact us, and they can do this every year. It starts on May 1st. It runs through June 8th. It's the first level of appeals. This is sometimes they call it a paper level. They submit an appeal, we review it, and then on August 15th, we send a notice of determination. In that process, we communicate with the property owner. If they're willing to talk to us, we can negotiate a reduction in value if they provide us with information, or we come across information that we didn't know about before. We can reduce values at that point, or we can leave them the same if we can't find any justification or any way to support a reduction in value. We would not adjust the value. So they get their notice on August 15th. They still have concerns. We move on to the County Board of Equalization, where there's actually a hearing officer. We have hearings. Again, we can still continue to negotiate, and new evidence is brought to us. We can consider that. So not everything goes to hearing. Many times we can work out an agreement on value with a property owner based on evidence that's come to the surface. So the county board holds their hearings throughout September and October, and then November 1st, they send out the results of those hearings to the property owner. And then within 30 days of that result being mailed to the property owner, they can choose to go on to other levels, go to the district court, binding arbitration, which is a hearing where the results are final. You no longer have recourse to go further, or you can go to the Board of Assessment Appeals, which is the state level. And just to note, this is the extended appeal period. Boulder County and larger counties in the reappraisal year use this extended calendar. There is a calendar that is much shorter, where all of this happens in the summer and is done by August. So many of the smaller jurisdictions use this shorter calendar to handle the appeal process. If you happen to be on vacation in May and you didn't file your appeal, or you got lost in a pile on your desk, you still have the opportunity to have your property reviewed. And this is through the abatement process. It triggers on January 1 of the subsequent year. So if this was for 2024 and someone missed their appeal in 2024, on January 1 of 2025, they can file for an abatement, which is an up to 2 years look back at their property value. And it is, they submit an appeal, we review it. It can go to a hearing officer for review. And if there isn't a resolution that's satisfactory, it can go on to the Board of Assessment Appeals. So there is amazing opportunities for a property owner to have their property looked at and review the value reviewed and bring more evidence and information to us. Since they're in that property, they know things we have no way of finding out. So that's the supportive value part of it. And this is just a quick slide that talks about who does what. So assessor's office establish actual value of properties, and that's the whole process that gave you a very high level overview on. We go through the whole mass appraisal and appeal process to establish a final value, which we then multiply times the assessment rate. And the assessment rate is determined by the state legislature at this point. At one point prior to Gallagher being laid down, that was done by the Division of Property Taxation. But now it's the legislature, and that's been changing every year since the Gallagher was laid down. So then the result of that math is the assessed value, and the assessed value is what you pay taxes off of. So for residential property, that's pretty low. For commercial property, it's up in the 27 to 29%. And the next part of the formula is the mill levy. So we take the assessed value times the mill levy, and the mill levy is established by taxing jurisdictions. We give them the values, they look at their budget, they decide what their mill levy is. The mill levy is given to the county assessor, who applies it to the assessed value, determines what the property tax part of your property tax bill is, and hands that to the county treasurer. And the county treasurer then does the collection of taxes. They also add other fees. I know up in our county, there's a mosquito fee, and there's a Northern Colorado water fee that the treasurer adds to tax bills. Those are not something that assessors have anything to do with. So as you all know, we're in special session, so this whole process is under discussion. So I don't have any answers as to exactly where we'll land. Hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have a better sense of what assessors will be doing in Colorado this year and into the future years. So I think that's it. I'm going to hand it over to Lori, and Lori, just let me know when you want me to change slides.
Great, Cynthia. Thanks so much. So not only is my presentation not exciting, but it's definitely what we do is not as dramatic as what Cynthia does. So as Cynthia was talking about, we just basically record the documents. We're just the clerk that records the documents. So we're required to file and maintain all the county real estate ownership documents as set forth by Colorado law. And we record them, we index them, and permanently maintain those documents. We not only record documents that are related to real estate, we record all kinds of documents. Some folks want death certificates recorded. We record liens and different things like that. We have probably about 100 different document types, but the most popular document types do relate to deeds. Okay. So we call it a race to the counter state. So you race to the counter with your documents so they can get recorded first. Anything that affects the real property must be made public record and serve as notice to others that someone has an interest in the property. So that's another thing to keep in mind. We try to remind folks that when you do record something, it will become a public record and available for public inspection. Okay. How do we record the documents? We record them whether they're sent, they can be sent electronically, or some folks still come in person. And we list our fees on our website. Basically have a fee for the first page and then each subsequent page. Through the years, we have these different surcharges that are added on to the base fee. So it's $13 for the first page. There's $2 of that goes into a special fund. And this fund at the end of each month that we collect locally here at the county is sent to the state, and they house the money for all of the counties. And then county clerks, most county clerks that are medium and smaller size counties, we're considered medium size. We could apply for those funds to upgrade our infrastructure to make sure that we have, that everything's running properly, that we're able to e-record documents, and that everyone's able to access those documents remotely. We can apply for grants for any type of thing that's related to our recording department. And so this helps title companies and everybody else that needs to do their work. We're pretty proud that we have through these grants and since I've been clerk and basically over the last decade, we've made it our priority to make sure that we have every single document that's recorded that has been digitally imaged and available on our website. We used to have a fee for that, but that helped subsidize the cost of getting those documents digitized. So back to the start of the county, everything's digitized and available online for free. And then we went one step further and we have every single document indexed grantee and grantor. And I believe we're only one of the few jurisdictions in the entire country that has it that way. I know my friends down here in Fremont County are working towards that, but they're only back to like the 1980s. It's quite a big lift, but we did apply for these grants because we thought it was important. And it was really important when the pandemic hit because folks could still do their work and stay at home and research and didn't need to come to the courthouse because we were closed at the time. Okay. So, well, like I was talking about, most of the documents we record are related to real estate. However, any document that meets the margin requirements, top margin 1 inch and bottom side margins at least a ½ inch, can be recorded as long as the appropriate fee is received. These margin requirements are set in statute, and it's just so that we can place our seal and our document sticker on the document. So when it's recorded, it can be found later. So that's the only, like I was talking about, you could record a recipe if you'd like. You can certainly do that. We try to remind folks too that not only are these become public documents, that it doesn't mean that it's legal just because you want to record a document. Okay, next one. So we have our basic recorded documents. We do the easements and the liens, and we get subdivisions, plats, surveys. Also, our office does marriage licenses and civil union licenses. There's applications that are attached to that, as well as the actual license, and we keep those on file here. Special district inclusions and exclusions, municipal annexations, dissolutions, and any document that basically affects land. We also have what we call filed and deposited records. There are certain entities that need to file a document with us each year, and we keep those on file here for public inspection. We rarely have folks come ask for them, but we do keep those just in case someone did come ask for them. Other things that we keep track of, lost and stolen livestock. We get an alert every month, and so we keep track of those. It always makes me sad when I see a missing, donkey or something, but we also keep track of brands. We don't keep track of them, but there's a process through the state that brands for cattle and livestock, that people go through a process to get those brands, and then we keep a brand book here, and new brands that are issued, we keep a record of those, and we publish those as well. Okay. So the most common documents, a DD 214, a document for our veterans when they're discharged from the military. We have a service where we record DD 214s for them for free. And so we work with our Veterans Administration to make sure that everybody knows that they should record their DD 214 with us. That is not a public document. Nobody else can see that document. As a confidential document. But then in case something happens and either they might need it and can't locate it, or their family might need it for some medical care or something for them, we have them here on file, and there's just a form that the family or the veteran can fill out, and we will present a certified copy so that they always have a copy of their DD 214. We do a lot of other judgments and tax liens and things like that. There's a fee for those, government fee for those. It's a little bit of a reduced rate, but we do keep track of those as well. Okay. In 2020, we recorded, we can see how many documents we recorded. And in 2021, for my little office, that was an all-time high of recorded documents. And then after 21, and I'm not sure if it's interest rates, there's probably some different things that are affecting it. But when we know that most of these documents that we record affect land, you can see it's just gone down dramatically. And even the fees that we take in have gone down dramatically. So it's not like we can go, it's not a business where we can go advertise saying, oh, record your documents. But so we've had to adjust our budget significantly and find other projects for some of our staff to do, because we're just not, we don't need two people anymore doing this job. It's barely 1.5, and it's probably just a one-person job at this point. But so far in 2021, it's picked up a little bit. But as you can see, things have gone down significantly since 2021. Okay, Cynthia. This was a project, because we aren't as busy as we used to be, that I had my staff start. I was talking about this recently in one of our meetings. So they went through all of the recorded documents with the land records from 2023 for the residential property. And they have all of the years listed down, and then they started listing all of the LLCs that own the property, what was the consideration, the actual reception number, so we could go back and look at it later, and if there was any doc fee associated with that that transfer. So anyway, I have this. I could put it in a Google Doc. I'm not sure if this is helpful, if it's not helpful, if you could provide me some guidance on how we could research this even more with with what we have here, because I know there's more transparency with regard to LLCs. But I know for a fact that some of these folks, they start an LLC for these subdivisions, and then they might they might change the name, and they're the same folks for another one. I thought I'd just list over on the right side here from 2023 back to 2008, the number for each year, how many of those were LLCs that purchased property in our county. So I think some years obviously were lower, some are higher, but I don't know how significant it is, or if there is any more research to be done with this, but I'd be more than happy to put my staff on that. Is that it, Cynthia? Look at us. I told you it wasn't very exciting. I'm just the clerk that records the documents. But the clerk is the job that's the other duties as assigned. I think original election official, we do the registration of all the cars and vehicles in our county. We do titles and registrations. We run elections, which is quite dramatic. We do not have time to go into anything that's to do with that. There's drama and perceived drama with that. We're also the clerk to the Board of County Commissioners, so we were in charge of posting the agendas and in charge of meeting minutes, and which we, since I've been clerk, we started doing a live feed of those. That also helped during the pandemic. A live feed of those and associating the minutes to the feed so that folks can research that later. We record their resolutions. We administer liquor licenses in our county, not inside the municipalities, but outside in the county. We issue trash haulers licenses. I mean, there's just a lot of different things. We also, there's just a lot, but our recording duties are very important. We take it very seriously. We know that we're just stewards of these records for this time being. We want to make sure that folks can find them later. So looking forward to hopefully out of this task force, if we can come. There's not a lot of statutes that really describe what we do when we're recording the documents. It's just very, each clerk kind of does it a little different, and that can be good and that can be super bad. But looking for guidance, and if we can get it in statute, as you need to have this type of a doc type and this type of indexing, I think that would be helpful.
So I want to thank you guys so much. And I know you probably think I'm just a total nerd when I was like, oh, and it's going to be so exciting. Point is, you guys manage huge amounts of data. And for all of us that are involved in data and understanding what it means, that's why it's cool. Okay. So I know that Leia's got a question, and then I've got a series of questions that really gets to this management of data. But Leia, let's get your question first.
Yeah, thank you. Lori, you mentioned that you can record any document you want. You brought up the example of like a recipe. Can somebody say, I want this document associated with this property record? Like, how is that document? Like, if it was something as obscure as that?
Sometimes we get subsequent documents to associate with a piece of land or something. We can never erase a reception number. That's a big taboo, because obviously you need to keep the integrity of the numbers. Can't have any gaps or anything. But if the document did list some other reception numbers or anything like that, we would, my staff usually tries to pick those things out and then put it in the indexing, so when you are using the search engine, that you could find those documents. Sometimes there's a Scribner's error or a correction or something like that. And so we can attach it to that. We can never put it back into the original document though.
No, I guess I'm just asking, like, if somebody requests, I want this document and I want it associated with this property, they can do that, this document.
Yes, and
Is that what you're saying?
yeah, and I mean, when they're recording the documents too, sometimes they have a very particular order of how they want the documents recorded. This should be the first page, this should be the second, and in through like that. But if it's a subsequent recordation, it does get assigned a separate reception number. It can't ever go back inside that document.
Okay. I think I'm just, I think you brought up a good point about just, what we're trying to get our arms around is just how many properties are recorded under an LLC, but that doesn't necessarily lead to what is the underlying ownership structure. And I'm just trying to think about if there was a standardized document that could be recorded with every property that would, indicate that in the future. That way, at least we can understand the data. And then could you search your records based on that kind of subsequent document?
I believe so, but see, we don't actually make up the document, so we couldn't actually add something to it. But Cynthia, your TD1000, is that a similar type process that you attach to it? Could you explain that?
So a TD1000 is a real property transfer declaration, and it is provided along with sale documents. So when you're closing on a property, it's one of those 1-inch stack of paper that you fill out. And it tells us information about the sale. Was it arm's length? What was the financing? Those sort of questions. That might be a place, and I don't know how you would do this. This would be something Lori and her team would need to look at it, but could you put in there, is this corporate? There might be a place on that form, and that's associated with the recorded deed. So they usually share a recording number somewhere you can connect them. In our records, we track from owner to owner. So if it was owned by the Smiths and the Joneses bought it, as long as I can track the ownership from one to the other, we'll list all the different deeds associated with that property. If an LLC is buying multiple properties, even if it's on the same purchase document, they'll have potentially different accounts, and that document will show up on all the records. So you can trace it by ownership. You could trace it by reception number. Date of recording, we collect all of that information. But what gets hard is getting to the root of the LLC. So who is that LLC? Just a mom and pop where I'm protecting my ownership by putting my little second home in a rental, in an LLC? Or is it a big corporation that has an LLC for every property they own in your county, and there's some big parent company behind it? We may not know that. That may not show up on any record that we see come out of the clerk and recorder's office. So does that answer?
Yeah, that answers my question. It sounds like maybe the forms that already exist could potentially be expanded upon. And if that was the case where in the future you had to indicate the underlying ownership structure, you could potentially search for it in your records the way you search for other kinds of factors. So I think that answers my question about what is currently in place and also what maybe is potential for us to consider.
And
The
Leah,
other
to your-
topic that has come up over and over again through the legislature, and it's not a popular idea, is tracking whether it's a primary, secondary. I mean, if you're a resident, we already do that for seniors who get the senior exemption. We track that that's their primary residence. That's why they get the exemption. But that's come up with the short-term rental discussions. Should we be tracking if this person or this entity lives in this home or not? But there's a lot of opposition to that in the short-term rental market. So be something to talk to legislators about. The way it was posed to the assessor's office, it would be much like the senior exemption application process, where there'd be a form that the division would provide to the property owners. There would be an application time, and we would track that in our records. But again, something to discuss whether it's possible, or whether you'd have a lot of opposition to it.
if we wanted to open up a really big can of worms, it could just be, I just don't know how popular it would be with the title companies, and that would be what part of the closing process where they would have to have it. But as Cynthia says, sometimes there's opposition and they try to, put it under a LLC or something like that, or privacy issues for whatever reason. But that would be another opportunity. And then once it's in that document and it's required, then that would certainly get recorded with it to show the structure. But that's a good point.
Heidi, it looks like you've got a
Yeah, I
question.
think Laura, you may have answered my question, but Cynthia, I was going to ask how that would be like verified or audited. So if someone doesn't, I mean, with like short-term rentals, for example, if I don't register, but I continue to short-term rent, I mean, who figures that out, right? I mean, I think it's generally a neighbor who complains about noise, and then that goes to the town, and then they check that out. When we were doing housing needs assessment in Summit County, we did quite an extensive analysis of assessor data, and there were a vast number of properties that I couldn't figure out the use. So they didn't match the short-term rental database. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people who are underreporting that, and so that's my question: is how would you know? Or I'm curious about would the burden fall on you all to be that sort of auditing entity?
What I hope would be is that there would be an application where you have to attest. So I have to say that I, under perjury, say I am the primary owner. I also know with the affordable housing conversations that are going on, I wouldn't want to diminish somebody's ability to rent out their basement or their garage, fix their garage up and have an ADU.
Sure.
So I don't know how this, I mean, that's where the legislature will have to play in, is how do we protect people's rights in a housing crunch like we're in, affordable housing crunch. So I'm getting off topic, but yeah, we would have to have, and this is
come adjust that somehow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
And the division has had forms where when you sign it, you are attesting to your, to what you're saying. So you can be held accountable.
Mhm. Okay, great. Thank you. That's really
Heidi, some of these folks kind of out themselves, because we had a gentleman that was, just a funny story. So a gentleman that was saying he wasn't, short-term renting and on, but then all of a sudden he had a website, and then he not only was short-term renting, he was going to serve a free cup of beer when you checked in or something. I was like, dude, no. So big red flag.
true. I mean, you do. Yeah.
I called him on the phone. I was like, dude, take that down, because you can't do that. Or it's just no, don't. So we made an even bigger red flag on him now. So obviously, that could go in his permanent record, like you weren't even following the rules then. So if he does try to, but we do have our local, county, and then we work with the municipalities trying to get we're always, seems like 10 steps behind, but trying to get folks registered. But it is there's no easy answer. That's very difficult to
that's
catch,
my question.
so that they aren't complying by the rules.
Okay, thank you.
So I would be curious. So, I mean, I think we're getting to the big point here is, there is this concern about understanding ownership of housing and potentially how it's used, if it's owner or renter. And then again, trying to follow, when we were looking at the records, and I'm glad that Phyllis and Jennifer are on, because I know Jennifer's been digging in this and may have some good questions for you guys. But, it'll be ABC1, ABC2, ABC3, so like you look at the pattern and you're like, all right, ABC 123 belongs to somebody that has this same pattern. Now we need to figure out who that goes to, maybe, to see how many total units they may own, to see if are they a mega or are they just a mom and pop. And there's two different sides of this. It's one, understanding the transactions, like Lori, you were showing with what you were able to pick up for Chafee in terms of transactions. But sometimes we want to know just the total N, how many of the total units. And, and I think it's great to have both Cynthia and Lori, because, I mean, yes, Chafee's a bigger county, but not as big as like Boulder. How, you can maybe do some of the work for smaller counties, but bigger counties, I mean, how is that managed? So, Cynthia, you had mentioned, oh, I'm getting off track. She's like, no, you're not. What you were talking about, I think, are some of the critical issues. So I'd like to see, I don't know, Jennifer, how often do you get to actually talk to and ask all of these great questions to folks that manage the data?
Hi, sorry to join late. It was another call. Yeah, I think where I picked in, I think you were just starting to scratch this surface around the complexities on who is really behind the ownership here. And I think I'll just maybe offer up and then and position it as something to respond to with any caution from your expertise. Is the way they've looked at it so far and other kind of related work around understanding common portfolio holders is not so much on, you do see some of these patterns with respect to the naming conventions that they're using. But pinning them actually back, the best proxy we have that we can do systematically from what has been in my view shed so far is find the common addressing in with those entities. And if that is some knowing that, sure, they could be different entities that are using the same mailing address, knowing that we can't exactly narrow that further, but if there's any other kind of cautions or thoughts around the common addressing that come to mind.
When we record the documents, we normally don't have the actual address, so we just have the legal description, but Cynthia would have the address
Right.
for the tax bill goes.
Right, because I have to get notices and tax bills out. The issue with addresses is government's the last to know if it's been changed. So I get a huge number of returned items every time we do a mailing. Huge numbers come back, to the point where I don't have the staff to try again. So that would be a word of caution, is that you may or may not be getting especially mailing address. Situs address, if you're looking at the street address of a property, that's far more accurate. But that doesn't tell you where the mail is going.
Right.
So I think that's a good place to start, but just know that it can be a pretty inaccurate data set.
So I have a question on that, Cynthia. Do you use the addresses that were shown on the Secretary of State's website for like their certificate of good standing for the entity? Is that the mailing address?
If we take it off the recorded document and the associated real property declaration schedule, the TD 1000, and we tend to, a lot of times they'll put the lawyer's address, the person who was held by the title company will be on there. And so we have to do a little digging if it looks unusual. If we cannot find something and it keeps coming back, we will go to the Secretary of State's site. I mean, we start digging, we start looking for, can I find their corporate website? Do I have a phone number I can call? We just sent our notices of determination out and I got an entire subdivision back. So 400 notices came back to me. Turns out they had just changed their mailing address and I had to dig around to find, it was a national developer. They've got properties all over the country. So I finally got a hold of somebody who could give me the new local address so I could get the notices to them. So we do turn to just about any source that we can find.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a reliable source and we don't go from bad to worse with our address.
I would think that business registration, which I think that has to be attested to or renewed annually,
Mhm.
right? Where your data will only be the last time the property transferred. Might be a good one. And I was thinking when Lori Mitchell, when you were displaying your spreadsheet, you had your staff create for that kind of extra tracking. I wonder if an additional column of like the entity registration address would help find
Yep.
the common on there, because that it's probably the property owner, but if it is a large entity that has multiple, and it could be an attorney, right? And you have a common address there, might just be another data point that provides some information.
Great, I'll make sure we get that going.
I was just curious if like utility bills, if anybody's tried to merge that to see where the who's paying the utility
We-
bill.
We would need access to that data. It doesn't come into my records. I don't see people's utility bills. And I haven't built, maybe some counties have, but I haven't built a relationship with the cities to say, share that with me. There's some resistance at times to do things like that. I know business licenses, I run into resistance to, because that tells me when there's a new business, right? There's resistance to share that information. So we need to build the connections to say the assessor shall have, or the clerk shall have access to these records so
Okay.
that we can make that happen. And the Secretary of State, my staff goes in one by one because we're looking at things as they come up. I've never looked into whether or not I can get a bulk download to say, here's all the ones that, I don't know how they would know they were in my county because they're done by entity. Maybe, yeah, that would be something to look at is can we access that data in some larger quantity than one by one?
We have pulled the entire.
Oh, good.
Of registrations in the past.
Okay.
But like you said, you don't know like where they're grounded and location in that way. But if it's, as long as we can have a digital record, we could run essentially a query that attaches of like where they're present across, the various counties that get amassed into this inquiry.
So I think Heidi, in your shop, you've done a little bit of this work. What, if you could, magic wand it, as what would you like to be able to see if you, and same goes to Jennifer. What would you like to be able to see? I mean, I think that this transparency, I think there is a lack of transparency, not like intentionally, well, maybe intentionally, but it makes it really hard to understand who owns. So what would you like to see? Because I think that having that discussion is worthwhile, why we've got, experts here.
I mean, I would, so based on most of the work that we did was in Summit County about 1.5 years ago. If I could, and I'll let Jennifer opine on this obviously too, but if I could design a perfect database with this information, I mean, if you had the owner of the LLC, like the family ownership or the corporate ownership, that seemed to be, I'm thinking back, it's been a while since I looked at this, but excuse me, that seemed to be all over the place. The use, so some attestation of use, intended use for that year or for that 2-year period. And then I think the other piece that we ran into in Summit was the frequent use of PO boxes to receive mail. So very, very few people receive their mail at their actual physical address. And so the physical address of the owner, not the mailing address of where the tax bill is received.
Well, when it comes to PO boxes, we've tried to, because all our mountain communities don't use PO boxes. The post office will not share. So we cannot get the physical address or the owner name associated with a PO box. So that's probably federal law. But so that's a dead end for us, because that's, those are a lot of those come back to me, someone changed their box number or their new owner, and they never gave us that PO box. And so,
Yeah, and the other thing that I was
tough.
surprised by is how many PO boxes are in like FedEx mailing sites. Like they're in weird locations. Like it's not always I couldn't always identify if it was a PO box sometimes because they would go to a strip mall. So that's the other, it's not always a federal post office entity. The other thing I would say on the utility question too is we tried to get Excel Energy to give us data, and they gave us some data, but it was significantly inadequate. So I think the utility, although that would be really desirable, assuming that I think most of the time when the utility bill is passed on to the tenant, that would imply or goes to the mailing address, that would imply a long-term rental. We were trying to figure out the long-term rental units and long-term rental status, so that was our objective. But trying to, that would be a real ideal situation, is to try and merge where those utility bills are getting mailed if possible. But I think that's a pretty big hurdle.
Yeah, and Boulder County has tried that. That was back under City Domenico as the assessor, tried that, and hoping to help them, because we track state assessed properties and locations of their entities in our county is important to us. But we could never get them to share data back with us.
Mm-hmm.
Only other thing that, I don't know if it would work or not, but, because two of my municipalities out of the three, Buena Vista and Poncha Springs, are both, have to have a PO box if you're within the city limits. But then we do, another public record is, voter registration, which would have the mailing address and the, physical address, the residential, because you have to know where they live. That's how voter registration is based in Colorado, is on your residential address, to know what precinct you're in and what things you're, qualified to vote on. But I know that's another heavy lift, but anyway, that's another possibility. But talk about not updating government records. It's like everybody's getting mad at me because they're still getting their adult children's ballot at their house, but it's like I didn't change your adult children's utilities or trash or their driver's license. It's up to them to change those things. So
I'm wondering, you guys mentioned utilities. I'm wondering about water, because isn't there a little bit different relationship with water, since that can be, like when you don't keep up on your water bill, that can be then a thing on your property. What's that called?
Lien.
A lien, thank you.
Yeah.
So has anybody tried to play with water records, water utility records?
We did
you have a
yours,
lot of wells.
but I was just sorry, Lori.
sorry.
In the rural parts of the state, there's going to be wells, so it's going to be irrelevant at that point. But in the urban areas, we tried years ago, Dr. Cobb, to get Denver Water, and it was a little bit of a challenge because we were trying to just get was the property vacant or not, and based on water flow usage, but it was a challenge still.
I don't know if every county's public health department's the same way, but they track sewer and septic and wells. You have to check wells, and I don't know how accurate or accessible that data would be, but then that's unincorporated. It's not going to work in the city.
Those are all really good ideas. Lori DeCrow?
When we did tried to do some research on water, what we ran into was the renter is the person who is signed up with the water company. And so that takes out the use of trying to find the corporate owner if the renter is the one that has to sign up for water. So
Okay, so and that was kind of my question on water, because I thought there was a thing like you didn't want your renter necessarily to sign up for water, because if they didn't pay their bill, then the water people could put a lien on your property if you weren't following what your renter was necessarily doing or paying. And so that's why I thought that maybe there was a difference between like electric and water. But it sounds like there's other issues like septic and stuff
And
like
I
that.
wonder, Elizabeth, if it depends on if you're in a municipality or unincorporated, because our municipalities, they want whoever's paying the bill. That's the name they want on that water bill. So, yeah.
All right. What other questions do we have in just kind of brainstorming, thinking about, easier, better ways to try and understand. I mean, and it's not just for this necessarily the corporate ownership. I mean, it would probably be really helpful in the concepts of short-term rentals, which I know opens a bag of worms, but just want to make sure we're thinking about some of these data constraints.
So one of the things that we only have 2 entities in our county that do anything with this, the city of Boulder and Boulder County, are rental licensing fees. So you have now, there are a lot of people who cheat on that and don't get a license, but the city of Boulder actually charges. So it's a $75 per unit fee, and they're talking about increasing that. So that comes through my office just as a placeholder thing that I hand to the treasurer. But if that were done more globally, you would have something, but you're asking cities to pick up a whole new set of business and how they handle that, but any kind of record. Because I know the big apartment complexes come in at, $75 per unit and on one account, and I can see the sum. I can tell you how many units they have. So
Wow. I didn't know you had that. That's sweet.
for the city of Boulder, and it's in my records. I get it every sort of middle of November. They provide me a list. And then I carry it on our file.
Because Denver also has that now. All rental properties had to be registered. And that, again, that might be a really good resource as well if it were done right consistently across. But like you said, it adds a whole nother department within business, unit within a city or a county. Lori DeCruz.
I was gonna mention one thing about Cynthia was talking about the short-term rentals and the different strategies we started keeping track, and we just have a serious, you could just see 60% of the houses downtown, dark most of the week, and then lights are on the weekends, and there's no place for workforce. I mean, nobody has a place to live, and it's been very contentious over the last, really hot for the last 3 years. And so there's been things on the ballot, having new occupancy fees. So it's almost like a hotel, motel, where each night they pay another fee and stuff like that. But like you say, we're still having folks not getting registered and different things. But I think nobody wants to go there. But I think one of the solutions would be to tax them like a business, because unless they can come up with it, like, yeah, this is how we live here and we're just renting this, part of the property these certain days or whatever, this is our one residence. If we could just do that and eliminate, I think that it would be super helpful if we could just tax them just like we would a motel, as a business.
Lori DeCrow.
So I absolutely hear what you're saying. That has been tried in the legislation the last couple of years at least. And so, there's a program through Division of Housing for manufactured home parks, and it might be worth reaching out to them because they require every manufactured home park owner to register and go through their program, and they have to pay a fee for every single space that they have available for rent annually. And it's established as a dispute resolution means for the tenants to be able to have a better quality of life in some of these manufactured home parks. So it might be worth reaching out to Division of Housing once we're ready, if we're going to try and put legislation through, that there's some sort of requirement. The problem is, I don't know where that requirement would fall. I mean, it's a huge workload. So I don't know where that requirement would fall. Certainly, you know, Division of Housing is not going to want to take that on with everything else they've got going on. But there are some programs out there that were started because of legislation that force these property owners to share their information. So
I'm curious, is anybody aware, and especially maybe in the networks that Cynthia and Lori work in, other states that have done things to better understand the ownership of housing?
You know, and this is coming up in this legislative session. I had a legislator calling me about it yesterday. Again, it's tracking ownership. So like the state of Utah, that's how they reduce the tax impact on properties, is by identifying what's a primary, what's a secondary ownership. That's also done in the Carolinas. And I'm sure there's other tools out there that I'm not aware of, other processes, but basically you have to identify whether you're a resident in that home or not.
I had one comment on Lori's comments about the mobile home parks and different things like that. And something else to keep in mind, those are still considered vehicles, and they the individual ones are taxed like you know, like you buy a car or something like that, just like a tiny home if you built it on a trailer. So there's other fees involved with those manufactured homes, like especially on the purchase and everything with regard to the sales tax, as well as yearly fees for those as well.
All right, so any other questions on this presentation or thoughts for people to share? I'm just trying to keep an eye on the time. So I thought that was outstanding information, a lot of great information for us to be thinking about. Thank you so much, Cynthia and Lori, for all of your really good information. I appreciate you guys taking time, especially knowing the week. We were thinking that this last week of August wasn't going to be so bad. So sorry.
Only budget hearings, you know, just different craziness, right?
Right. Sorry. I mean, you know, as a public official, you probably never have downtime. So in terms of looking at the rest of the agenda, we do, well, first, maybe we'll have both Jennifer and Phyllis put their faces on. Again, let everyone know that within the scope of work and the RFQ process, we had 3 people come in, and we were very fortunate to have Frankie, Avilia, Adam, myself review the proposals. We've decided to go with Jennifer and Phyllis. Where I think we're very lucky and fortunate to be working with them, and they've done a lot of work in Colorado and have been playing with this kind of data for a bit. So they're well aware of what is out there, and we'll start implementing as soon as I can get one more signature. We're having a hard time, a little bit of a challenge with the contracting process, but one more signature and hopefully things will be set and they can start doing their work. And then hopefully we'll have them, you know, attending monthly, and that way they hear what's going on and then can draw these connections between their research as well as what they're hearing from you guys. In terms of future speakers, we have talked to both Colorado Poverty and Law Project. There's a person there, Jordan Kotler, and she was on for a second today. There was a little miscommunication, but I believe she will be presenting next month. on kind of some of the research they've been doing, and they've been totally following this same thing. And so they're really excited to connect with us and the work that you all are doing and the work that they're doing. We also spoke with Jeff, and I can't remember Jeff's last name, with Lincoln Institute, and he's working on a tool called Who Owns America. If you guys look it up, and we can send it out maybe after this meeting. It is an interesting tool. They're not as far as long as I was hoping. I was hoping, oh, we could just click a button. No, they're not quite there yet. They're getting there, and so it's the same idea of there's general interest across the country in terms of understanding ownership for a gazillion different reasons. And I think it's going to come down to how can we get better data and information. So that's why I think the information that Lori and Cynthia provided today will be a good start. I see Lori DeCrow, you have a question or comment?
I have a comment, but I don't want to get too excited about it. So keep yourselves in check here. But we just hired a statistical analyst and a data manager at the Division of Property Taxation based on legislation that was passed last year. And we have a heat map that has valuation, has some information on it. And we hired these two people specifically to extend that heat map, and it will now carry ownership information based on the assessor's records, as well as classification codes, which would help identify how the property is classified, residential, commercial, whatever. And it'll have valuation, it'll have mill levy, it'll have a bunch of stuff none of you are concerned with for this purpose. But that is something that is in the works. I'm not entirely sure how soon we're going to have that up, but my husband is a hunter, and he has an app on his phone that he can click on and see ownership of all the properties. And so I envision this being similar to that. Elizabeth, I have no idea if being able to look at that app that he uses would be something that would be helpful. I can throw the app name in the chat if anybody else is familiar with it. It just identifies who owners are, so they know when they're hunting if they're on private property or public property, but it identifies the private property owner's name. So I don't know if something like the heat map we're developing or that kind of app would be helpful. But when you were speaking to the Lincoln Institute, we know that they're working on that as well. So if that's something that would be helpful, I can get the app name or share as we progress at the division.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that'll be great. I think it is exciting, honestly, where everything is moving in this direction in terms of really trying to get better data and information available. And we're excited about those hires. We got to participate on the hiring process, listen in on the interviews. And so I think the mission behind it is going to be exciting. But again, same kind of, I don't want to say constraints, but challenges, that we're having right now. But I think ultimately coming up with an evergreen tool is going to be ideal, because it's great, that we're able to contract with Phyllis and Jennifer to do this now. But it's like, once this year is over, then it's like, you have to almost start all over again. So creating this tool that you guys are looking at and that others are looking at, I think is definitely the way forward and what people are very interested in having. So I think that might be even something exciting to look at in a couple of months when they've started and start visioning, right? And certainly feel free to share the hunting tool as well. Again, if anyone has recommendations for speakers, please share them. I think, both of these that we have coming up with the Lincoln Institute and Colorado Poverty and Law were ones that were shared by people on this team. So If you please send speaker names. And it would be really help if you like create that introduction for us so that we know who to look for and how to bring them on. But right now, I think we've got, fortunately, folks for probably maybe September and October, or maybe we'll try and do 2 in September. It's really hard to do more than 1 at a time, simply because there's a ton of questions. So any comments, general questions from the task force right now? Otherwise, we'll see if there's any public comments, but I want to make sure that everyone from the task force has, oh, I didn't, actually, I'll let Jennifer and Phyllis, would you like to say anything? I kind of skipped right over that.
Well, I'll just say, nice to meet everyone, and we're delighted to be working on this project with you. If you don't know who we are, Jen and I staff an entity called the Colorado Future Center, which has actually in some incarnation been around since the middle, oh my God, I'm aging myself, like since the early to middle 2000s. We started working on state budget sustainability before Ref C passed. I think that's over 20 years ago. And I co-founded the center with Charlie Brown, who some of you may know from back in his legislature days. And when Charlie retired, I assumed the directorship of the center. We've had some we were originally the Center for Colorado's Economic Future. So if you want to like trace our ancestry, that's where you would go. Anyway, the long and the short of it is when I became director, Jen and I had a previous relationship from work we had done together at DRCOG, and I was really interested in having the center move beyond macro fiscal only. And so I asked Jen to join as my partner in the center and was delighted that she did. So we've taken on kind of a dual portfolio around anything related to the umbrella of family economic security. And of course, housing became an integral part of that, which is how we came to the work we're doing and the work we'll do with you over the next few months. So thank you for the confidence in us to be your partners on this. And we look forward to working with you and meeting everyone over the time we work together.
Super. Thank you, Phyllis. And we're excited to be working with you guys on this. So again, thank you very much. Any other comments from the task force in terms of anything you want to share with us, with the group? Concerns, anything? All right, Adam, do you want to, if anybody has got a public comment, we will listen to those now, and it'll be limited to a minute. And if you do have a comment, Adam, how should they contact you?
So please put your desire to speak into the Q&A, and we will unmute you, and you can make your comments.
And while we're waiting for anybody to show up in that, just remind folks that our next meeting is September 25th. Again, we hope to be having Jordan Kotler from Colorado Poverty and Law talk about the work that they're doing and the research they've kind of done a big kind of literature review in terms of this corporate ownership of housing, as well as what other states are doing. So that I think is going to be very interesting to listen to, again, when we start thinking about potential opportunities for Colorado. Likewise, this month, I'm going to be putting together the scope of work for kind of the facilitator, writer, person that's going to be doing this next phase in terms of coming up with recommendations and getting some more feedback from around the state. So if anybody would like to participate in developing that scope of work with me, feel free to reach out, or if you've got a scope that might be kind of similar in content, feel free to share that with me, and we'll work on getting that out hopefully by the end of mid to end of September. so that we can have them on board kind of October, November to start leading this through the next year. And if you have recommendations of people that would be good folks to fill that role, that would be great. So Adam, checking in.
We don't have any requests for comment. So last call. I guess we're all right.
All right. Any last comments or questions before we end for the day? All right. Thank you again, Cynthia and Lori, for your great information. Good luck with special session, everyone. And have a great last couple of weeks of summer. And we'll see you all the end of September. Thank you. Bye-bye.